sits above the mantle on a couple rusty nails. And it's worth a bunch of money, but it damn sure ain't for sale. The good Lord only knows all the stories it could tell. Granddaddy's gun, he bought it new out of a Sears and Roebuck catalog, and it shot him in his shell over the top of an old bird dog. And it backed a burglar down when Grandma took the safety off Granddaddy's gun. It's just a double-barrel 12. The stock is cracked and it kicks like hell.
My name is Raymond Shook, and this is my FTT 104 Week 4 assignment. The instructor's name is Jared Caldwell. Today's date is June 12th, 2023. And today we will be going over the detailed strip of my 1953 Remington Gamemaster 760 chambered in 30-06. Today we will be using a hammer with both the plastic and the brass ends. I will be using a Wheeler screwdriver with a 5/32 Allen bit. I will be using 2 slotted flathead screwdrivers, and I will be using various size punches. As I had mentioned in the previous video, I had found an issue with this rifle. I was at the range a couple days before that last video, and I was experiencing light strikes. Upon doing the field strip, I had found a part to be broken. The part has come in, and during this video, you will see somewhere along the way where the broken part is removed, and you'll also see where the new part is installed. Stay tuned, and we'll get to that event here shortly. We'll begin by first ensuring that the firearm is clear and the workstation is free and clear of all ammunition. I have no ammunition on my table. My magazine is empty. I'm going to set it over here to the side. My firearm, I am both visually and physically inspecting the chamber and the mag well. There is no ammunition. And we will start on the field strip process. To begin field stripping, we will close the action, pull it back, and as you will see, there is a hole right here on the slide. We will take our bigger punch, we will set it inside of that hole. Let me get her clamped down. And we will turn it. Now that it is loose, we will take the firearm. I'm just going to set it on the scope for the time being so we can field strip. I'm not going to tighten down on the scope, but I will tighten the stock. We will loosen the slide tube, the action tube. We will set it to the side. We will then come forward on the slide and the barrel at the same time. As you can see, the dust shield has come out with it. We're going to set that over in our tray. We can come back. We will remove our bolt assembly. We're going to set it in the tray over here for now. And as I showed before, to remove the foregrip also known as the slide assembly. We will twist it and we will pull straight down off of the barrel, like such. At this point, our firearm is now field stripped per the manual. We'll set this right down here. Now, to remove, we are going to go ahead and remove the scope from the assembly. To do so, I'm going to adjust my vise inward. I'm going to set the barrel right here for the time being. Now that I have that adjusted, I'm going to loosen my clamps. I'm going to set the stock and the receiver in the clamps. As you can see, nothing will move. For the scope, I'm not going to take the scope out of the rings as I have it set exactly where I want it. On the back side of the scope rail, it is lined up perfect on the back side, which will make it easy when I go to reinstall. We'll take our 5/32 Allen and we will loosen the scope mount bolts. Slide the scope mount off, with the scope attached. We'll be setting that here. While we are right here, we can go ahead and remove the scope mount rail. Let me find the right Allen wrench real quick. Forgot to get the right size ahead of time. Looks like it'll probably end up being a metric size. Okay, it appears that it's actually in between the sizes that I have, unless I have it in my Wheeler screwdriver kit. Which, we got lucky. And I do have the correct size bit. That is a 5/64. In case you ever have to take one off of a Remington 760, it is a 5/64. It has 4 screws that hold it down. For now, well, I got it stuck. Get that out. Well, it appears that one there is not going to let me get it out at the moment. That one has already been stripped out, as well as the front one here. I have 2 of them that are stripped out, so I will not be able to remove the scope rail. But if I was, I would just undo these 4 bolts, and then when I reinstalled it, I would go back in with Loctite to hold it in place. So that is going to have to be put on hold for the time being. Okay, from this point, we will want to flip over our rifle. We will turn it upside down, tighten both the stock and the receiver. I have 2 pins right here that will need to be knocked out with a punch. Let me grab my smaller size punch. We would take and we would tap out the back one first. At this point we should be able to, it has a catch right there at the end. We'll set these to the side. We can now remove the trigger assembly. Here we have our trigger assembly. We have our action tube catch, our magazine release. We have our, slowly release this. We have our hammer, our sear, and these other little parts, I will post the names as we go along in the video, as I do not have them at the moment. But we'll begin. I'll leave that open. We will take this apart here in a minute as I get everything else out of the firearm. We have two little screws here at the top. And I'm not seeing what they hold in. But I will go ahead and remove those two little screws while we're at this point. Even looking at the schematic, I couldn't figure out what they held. So maybe as we take it apart, it'll shed light onto it for us. Throw that in between. Got that one. I'm going to set them in our tray here. Eventually I'm going to refinish this whole firearm. I'm going to redo the stock. I'm going to re-glue everything. And we will go from there. Okay, after removing those two screws, I still do not see anything that those screws would have been holding in place. The screws just go in from this side, and they seat right down here on the inside. You can see the two little holes. And as far as this bolt on the end right here, I'm not going to remove that, as it would require me to do some hammering and stuff like that on the bolt itself. So I'm going to leave that in there for the time being. On the back, it is held in place by one end that is starred, and that just kind of forms a pressure fit as it goes in. We will now remove the stock. Let me set the receiver inside the vise. We will take our small slotted screwdriver. There is two screws in the end. Let me start with the one on the big end first. Loose. These are tight as they're coming up through the rubber. And it's hard to get them out of the rubber, so I'm just going to leave them in there for the time being. At least in the front just a hair. Okay, we now have the butt pad off. see, it's got two pretty long screws. It's hard to push them through that old rubber. Eventually I'm going to get a new butt pack for it as well. But in order to prevent from tearing up the rubber, I'm just going to leave them in here. We're going to set that down here with the other parts. We're now going to grab our long slotted screwdriver. And inside here there's a long bolt that holds this onto the receiver. Sometimes it can be hard to get on. Let me turn it up towards the light so I can see it a little better. Okay, we are now going to loosen this screw up. I'm going to hold it together. It's way down in there. I wish I would have done these at the Phillips. It would have been a lot nicer. Problem is it's hard to see down in here and get the screwdriver lined back on. I'm going to step away for a second where I have better lighting so I can get that screw out, and I will be right back. Okay, we now have the screw loose, and as you can see, it comes apart. We have our receiver right here. We're going to set it in our vise here. We have our stock screw, the stock bolt right here. It runs in from this side up through here, and there's a lug. This here sets right down over the back of the trigger assembly. We're going to set our stock over to the side along with our stock bolt. We are now going to remove our bolt assembly. There's two little tabs, or two little pins, there's one on each side. We just kind of knock those out. And as we pull this out, this is the part I was speaking of. As you can see, you cannot see the firing pin. It should all be one piece. The firing pin, as you can see, is now two separate pieces. I now have the new firing pin in. I received it in the mail yesterday. Or I received it Saturday, I'm sorry. Received it in the mail Saturday. I got it from Numerich Gun Parts. They're great for getting parts for older firearms or even newer ones. What we have now, I'm going to set our receiver down here on my gun cleaning mat out of the way. We will now need our small punch to knock out a pin on the back of the bolt assembly. For this, we're going to tighten it up in our vise. Going to take my punch and I will tap that pin out of the bolt assembly. About halfway through. Readjust this real quick. A little bit more tightening. And as we come through, I want to make sure to keep my finger behind that pin so we don't lose it. Okay, the pin has fallen out. We have the pin. I'm going to set it over here at the other bolt assembly parts. The firing pin slid up. We have caught our punch on the way of the firing pin. I tap this other firing pin out real quick so we get the punch out. Let me grab that real quick and I'll be right back to show you the two pieces of the firing pin. As I said, I do have a broken firing pin which contributed to my light strikes. I'm going to set that in the tray along with the new firing pin for the time being. There were two little screws. I'm going to move them over to this tray. Set my action tube down here as I'm now going to work on the trigger assembly. And when we get to the trigger assembly, there's a lot of little bitty parts here. What we are going to start by doing is I take this pin right here out. It will remove the magazine catch, the action catch, and the hammer. So I'm going to start by releasing the pressure off of this spring. And this pin here, which holds that spring, slides out. I'm going to set it inside our tray. We have our magazine release, which has a spring on the bottom of it. I'm going to use my little screwdriver to press downward on the spring while I keep my thumb on it. Now, they just come up from the bottom. Then we go find that little spring, and we'll set this in our tray for the time being. And that is why sometimes it's easier to use a bag or something like that. I'll find that little spring and I will be right back. Spring didn't fly too far, landed right under my table. From here, we can take this little pin. It's wider on this side than it is this side. I'm going to set this on top of our little, let me get my bite, a little holder here. And take a punch, set it on there. Now we'll tap that pin out to the other side. And as you heard, it fell through. Let me show you. Here's the pin that holds the catches. There's still some spring tension in here, which just released. As I pull the pin out. We have our action catch spring. We have our action catch. We have our hammer. We have our hammer spring and our hammer spring guide. I'm going to set those together. Now, as we get down here to the trigger, this one is a little bit more challenging. We have a big pin that sets right here. You can see it only comes out one way. And below that, we have a small pin here and a small pin here. It appears we have a small pin on the back too. I am not sure exactly how this little pin comes out. I'll work on it here in a second. I'm going to work on removing this spring right here. Once again, hopefully it don't fly off. Okay, I caught it with my hand. We're going to set that down here in this little tray. I believe we can use this, yes, we'll use the screwdriver, push this little pin out. We can then slide the sear out from inside of the group. Everything else I think still has pressure behind it. Let me see if I can push this out. Okay, we have that. Big pin, the big hollow pin, we have it out. Set it in the tray. Okay. We're now going to work on this little pin back here in the back. Grab a little punch. Should be able to just push this. That one there just pushes out. Set this once again on my little block. That was holding a little spring in behind it. Pin is falling down in here. The spring was setting down inside the hole. This pin went through here to hold the spring down. We'll get to that here in a second. That is for our safety. I'll set this over here for the time being. Our safety will now slide out. Now, holding the rest of this in, we have one pin. I'm going to use the punch. I'm going to drive that out as well. Grab my hammer. stubborn pin. But I'm going to keep from breaking the plastic, I'm just going to leave that pin where it's at for the time being, because I don't want to move past that point. So now that we have that removed, all that is left is one little pin. And this is actually crimped together, more like a rivet, flat on this side, and it's been pressed on this side. And this is our trigger. I need to take it apart and clean it on a further date. I'll do that while I come through here and do the trigger job on it. But for the time being, our firearm is now fully detail stripped, except for one piece, and that is the action tube. I'm going to attempt to get this apart. A lot of times, with this being as old as it is, the action tube gets stuck, or the slide tube gets stuck inside the wood, but I will attempt to get it out. A little trick that I was taught, this is similar to a 20 or 12 gauge, is you can use a quarter a lot of times to loosen that up. This is my favorite tool for doing this because it fits in there nice and snug, and it looks like it'll actually be fairly easy to disassemble. The tube seems to move inside of the foregrip. So what I will do these long-winded threads takes it a minute. That's giving a little push. Okay, we have the cap off the top. Set it here. And these, once again, are riveted into place, so that cannot be removed. We have taken it down as far as we can without damaging it. We have our bolt assembly tore apart, our trigger group apart. We have the rest of the firearm apart. I'll come back and I will reassemble. Put our trigger assembly back together. We're going to start with the safety. I'm going to mount this in the vise for the time being. Going to give us a secure spot to hold it. We will feed. Let me get the actual safety installed before I get there, because this little piece has to be fed from the bottom. There's a safety catch which goes on the bottom of the spring. It fell in there nice and perfect. And then use a punch. You just barely push it down in there where the safety can install. The red side will go in from the left. We'll push it through. Okay, that moves back and forth. We're going to take our spring, set it right down inside. We're going to take our small punch, we get it in the vise, so this right here will be easier. Okay, we need our small punch. We have a little bit bigger punch. The bigger of the two that we use to press the spring down while we feed our small punch through. Now that our small punch is through, we can take our pin and use it. We push it in while we're pulling the punch out, keeping them connected. And if it hangs up, as you can see, it don't take much for the spring to push it out. here. Now that we have it started, grab my hammer, and use the copper end, and I use our punch, kind of push that spring down to get it started. This is always a nightmare. Screwdriver, I'm going to do it just a little push on that spring, what it says. So I had a smaller screwdriver somewhere. I'm going to try using this little Allen wrench. Now that I have the spring down, we should be able to tap it through. And I'm probably going to have to turn that spring over. It has one side that sticks up, the other side that don't. We have our punch back through. Like I said, sometimes this can be extremely irritating. Where did we set our pin? So we go, there it is. There we have it started. And once you get it started, halfway through we can take it out here, set it in our block. And tap it down to where it is in there nice and smooth. We now have our safety installed. Our safety now moves back and forth and locks into position. And right down in here, it contacts the back of the trigger on these little notches here. When it hits those little notches, it stops the trigger from moving. It'll slide over, and there's a lip that rests right in between the trigger notches. Okay, from this point, we're going to take our trigger and insert it nice and carefully. Make sure everything is lined up. For this, I'm going to use a smaller punch to help keep it lined up. I'm going to use the copper end to tap it through. Okay. Seems that the trigger moved as I was tapping it in, so now I have to readjust. Okay, we got that to come all the way out that time. take it from this side. And actually line up the trigger a little easier. Okay, we got the trigger started. Now, tap this through. Use our punch to finish it. Gotta go just a hair more to get it flush. Okay, we have it evened on both sides. Our trigger is now in. You can see the trigger is on fire. The trigger moves. We put it on safe. It won't move back. It's on fire and safe. So from this point we will continue on. We will put big pin back in. Got to pull the trigger backwards. We have our sear. This is kind of fun because we have a spring that goes down between these two parts. The fun part is going to be getting that spring back that in there once we get this pin in. Trying to feed this pin through the sear is going to be a challenge all of its own. We now have that in, we have that. Now we have our sear spring. As you can see, there's a lip on the sear and the trigger. This hooks down on there. Not like that. That is not how it's supposed to go. It is not supposed to fly like that. Excuse me while I go get it again. At this point we were trying to install the sear. Had to go pull off for a second. We will take the sear, we'll set it down in here. As you can see, the part that attaches the trigger to the sear will move down out of the way and allow you to install this little pin. As you're pushing down, you may have to wiggle the sear just a hair to get it to fully seat. Now that we have it seated, we can remove this back bushing. This will help us get the spring in. That was mainly just to hold everything in place. We will take our spring and our sear. This will set. So we pull the trigger all the way forward now. And we will feed it where it sits, and they're like that. We will now pull the trigger, which will allow us to slide our big pin back in. It just slides in, seats, and we are good right there. Just kind of even it out on the sides. Okay, now we can continue on. I'll move my block out of the way for the time being. Okay. We're going to finish putting the trigger assembly together. we're going to take the mag release, which sits right here. We're going to start the pin through it. We're going to take the hammer, set it down on the inside, start the pin through it. We're going to take the action release. We're going to set it. There's a groove in the side that it goes in. We're going to get it started in that groove. Bring it down. We will push the pin through. We're going to take the spring and the spring cover. We're going to push it down and set the action release over the top of it. Now that we have all of this in place, we will take and give this just a couple taps, or a few taps, to try to get it through evenly on both sides. Okay, we are through. The spring sets right here. Going to push this pin through. Has a notch on the bottom that the spring goes into. Get it turned where it will catch. Okay, we have it almost there where it's catching. Okay, we have it right there where it's catching that spring. Alright, now we will come to this side. This is going to be tricky. We have to fit this spring over here, and there is a hole right here that spring goes into. This is going to be tricky to get it lined up just right. With my little screwdriver so I can press it down into the hole. And we now have it on. Our mag release is functional. Our action release now works. I'm going to push this through just a hair more, so that way it all stays lined up. Make my block. Just a hair more. Get it all lined up. There we go. We now have it all seated. Our trigger assembly is back together. And as you can see, it works. I'll set the safe. Nothing happens. Everything is now operational. As you notice, I didn't take the ejector or extractor out. The extractor is kind of a clip that sits under the lip, right inside of here. And try to get that out, you have to be extremely careful, and I don't have another one on standby to replace it with. And plus, it's got a little pin right here that kind of holds it. And that little pin has been ground down smooth with the side. And then the extractor takes, or the ejector, as you can see, has a little bitty pin. My smallest punch would just barely fit in there, and I didn't want to widen that hole out and cause damage to that. So we will continue on with the reassembly. We're going to go back to the receiver. We have these two little screws that apparently don't hold anything in place. They're just sitting there, I guess, for an accessory or whatever it may be. I've looked online, I can't find any information on them other than they're in there. We're going to take these little screws and set them back in their hole. Screw them in. Okay, my little screwdriver that I had. Thought I had a smaller one up. Here it is. And here has a smaller tip on it. Fits another little smoother. Once again, ensure that you're using the right size tool for the job. You don't want to end up using too big or too small. Little bitty screws. Not much to get them started. I got started that time. Nice and snug. Dirt right in those threads. Okay, we got those in. Now we're going to reattach the stock. Remember, this was kind of a pain because it's hard to see down in here. So maybe we can get it without a problem this time. Put it back on. We have our stock and our stock bolt. We're going to feed it down in through here. Get that started. Take our screwdriver. If I can see in here to line it up. Got it lined up. Now for the fun part. We're getting it started. you some light so I can see. So I can get it perfectly lined up. Again, step over here where I got to the right. Okay, we now have the stock tight. I'm going to reattach the butt stock or the butt pad. Remember, we left the screws in because I didn't want to mess up the rubber. You go ahead and line those screws up. We have the butt pad back on. Now for the easy part. We can drop the stock back down in here, raise the receiver part back up. Tighten the stock. We tighten that to hold the receiver in place. First step, we're going to put the foregrip back together. And slide it back down in through. Like that. Oh. I need to go. We'll be all right. There we go. Catching right before she gets where she needs to be. There we go. We now have her in. We have our 4-end nut. Down with your fingers till she's snug. Now we go back to our handy dandy screwdriver, quarter, and we will use that to finish tightening it. Don't want to over tighten it and take a chance on breaking the wood. Just want it tight enough, and you can get it tight enough with just your fingers to where it's in there tight, but it's not tight enough that it breaks the wood. As you can see, there's no movement forward or backwards on it. We will now take our barrel, we'll slide it up, through. As you can see, there's little grooves on each side here. This clips right in like that. We set our 4-end down on here, and we'll take our bolt, and it clips right down in. What we do, we want to lock that into place so it all goes in together. We're going to set it right here. We have to install our dust shield. We install it all at the same time. Okay, our dust shield is attached where it needs to go. It's sitting right in the groove. We are now going to take our action tube. We're going to save the trigger assembly for last. I'm going to put a little bit of oil down in here while I have it opened up. Just run this down with our hand. We want to kind of hold everything together and open this up. Take our big punch. And once again, we're going to set it inside the hole. Run it all the way up against. And you turn it until it gets tight, but not over tight. You got to remember, this is a free floating barrel and everything has to be able to move. Alright, before I put the trigger assembly back in, I'm going to put a little bit of oil in here to lubricate the bolt. Slide it forward. Run just a slight bit of oil there, down through here, right along where that slides. I've already oiled up the trigger again. We are going to set our trigger. This is always the fun part. You have to get everything lined up perfectly. Side to side. We have this back down in here. So this right here is the front part, because everything gets so tight. Check it. Move it down in through the space. And then just line up, it sets in, you heard it snap. Everything is now in place. Now, we can take our pins. One side has a catch, one side doesn't. There we go, we got it started. We can now take our punch. Just gently tap it in to get it started. Oh, it shot right on in, no problem. With the plastic, we'll just tap it where it's even. Now for the front one, same thing. We'll push this through for the most part. We're going to use our plastic side. Everything is back together. I will now take it up, flip it over. We will reinstall the scope. That down where it rests in there. And if you remember, the back part of the scope was even with the very back. So I'm going to slide it on. We'll get it all lined up, slide it on here. Hopefully my scope stayed sighted in. There we are. We are flush on the back. We now take our screwdriver with our, now what size was this again? This was a 5/32. I'm going to run these up. I will grab the torque here in a second. We will torque them down. Calls for 20 to 25 on these mounts. I torque them down to about 22. With the fat wrench, it's hard to get an exact estimate, but it's like 22 and a half where it stops. I'm going to get those snug. When I get my fat wrench out, then we'll finish torquing these down. Setting my fat wrench. I couldn't really find any other specs on this firearm with it being as old as it is. The book didn't really give information, and when I contacted Remington, they didn't really have much information on it either, on the torque specs. So really all I can do is just torque the scope rings to the correct torque. Have it set for about 22, 22 and a half. We're going to tighten it. That one's tight. That one's tight. That one's tight. I'm going to come back through. I'm just going to double check them. Okay, those are all tight. Scope's not moving. Set my fat wrench back up and we will perform a functions test. Okay, loosen her up. We are going to start by opening the slide. It closes pretty smooth. We're going to put our safety on. Slide moves. Trigger does not move. Go to fire. Trigger fires. Try it again. We'll come back. Put it back on safety. It does not move. We will insert the magazine and take the magazine out to ensure that it works. And I was going to take the magazine apart, but the requirements to do it, you can end up bending the feed lips, and with this being the only magazine I have, I didn't want to take that chance of bending the feed lips, or the lips that hold the cartridges in, because there's a way you're supposed to be able to twist it and all that, and on the process you can even bend these little front lips that hold it in. Like I said, the original magazines are getting kind of hard to come by, so I just didn't want to take a chance on trying it until I get another magazine. At this point, we will try it again with the magazine in. It's on safe, no fire. Fires. Fires. Safety, nothing. At this point, we are done reassembling and function checking the firearm. And this is my Remington Gamemaster 760. Okay. In conclusion, the trigger assembly on these can be a challenge. They have some little bitty springs that are under high tension, then they've got some bigger springs that are under even higher tension. It took me several takes of trying to get the trigger assembly back together. A few choice words now and then, as stuff would end up flying across the room, as I would have it almost together and bump a pin and end up knocking everything loose. But other than that, once I do the trigger assembly a few more times on this, it won't be much of an issue now that I know the little tricks I learned along the way. But I'm pretty sure that y'all are happy with the little bonus content that I threw in with that little firing pin. It's amazing that something that small can give you so many problems. I was having to hit the primer twice per shot to get it to fire. And I knew my field strip video was coming up, so I decided that while I was doing my field strip video that I would do a practice run before, and that's how I found this. Once again, during the field strip, things like this can be noticed. When you get into a detailed strip, that's when you'll notice even more. Pay attention as you take stuff apart, because if I wouldn't have been paying attention and noticed that this end didn't move with this end, I probably wouldn't have caught it during the field strip. But anyways, Jared Campbell, I appreciate this class about different firearm tools. I appreciate the material you put out there for us, as well as your guidance throughout the course. And I'd like to conclude this up with a little bit of safety. When you're messing with the firearm, and there's even anytime you mess with the firearm, taking it apart, cleaning it, number one, make sure it's unloaded. Number two, always keep the barrel pointed in a safe direction. And number three, wear eye protection. Had I not had my glasses on a while ago, I probably could have lost my eye to a spray. But that right there just brings up the importance. Always keep your workbench kind of organized. I got a little unorganized a while ago while fighting with the trigger, trying to find something to make it work. But that's part of the learning process. That's one reason we're going through this course. It makes us get our hands on firearms. It makes us learn how they operate. And it makes us learn how to do the job that we're going to school to do. We may not be in a classroom setting, but the materials they give us, the materials you can find online, can help you out a lot. When it comes to an older firearm like this, the manufacturer may not have all the information. The manufacturer may not have all the specs. They may not be able to get you a book for it, like the user manual or even a parts book. There's different sources online. I used Firearms Guide to get the schematic and all the parts list. I'm pretty sure I said the wrong name for a few of the parts. I'll fix that whenever I do the editing. But once again, do your research, be careful, and be safe. Raymond Shook telling y'all have a good night and enjoy the rest of your day.